Good afternoon. It is Bodyshop X staff for another afternoon of BX Live at Lunch. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to hit the comments right here down below in the comment section. If you're on Instagram, same thing. Go ahead and send us a little message. Let us know you're watching. Thank you guys for appearing and showing up on BX Live at Lunch. Today's topic is in-season training. It's spring season. There's a lot of high school sports going on. There's track, there's baseball, there's lacrosse, there's soccer. And there's a lot of weird things going on because there's also football in some areas of the country or some colleges. So the question is, especially this last year where we've had a lot of chance to really dig in to some of this off-season training, not knowing what's going on with what sports, what do you do after you've made all that progress and then start playing your season? What happens to those gains? What happens to your progress? And how do we address that as an athlete who is going from 4 to 5 days a week in their off-season program to 4 to 5 days a week within their sport and very little time within the gym? So what are some of the concerns that happen once you go from your off-season program to your sport? One is that lack of gains, like we just said. Zach, give us a little bit of information on some of the things that other athletes might consider going into their off-season program.
In-season program?
In-season program. Thank you, sir.
Right. So like we were saying, the off-season program is designed to get those gains, get you ready for the season. And the goal, aside from winning games and practicing and getting better at your sport during the season, should be to maintain those gains through the season or minimize the drop-off. So that next season, next off-season training, you're starting from a better spot than you started the previous one.
Big fact.
So looking at it that way, obviously there's some different variables in there from off-season training. You're playing games, you're doing intense practices, so you need to back off a little bit on your training while still maintaining. So there's some differences there.
And there's other studies that will show that there's a reduction in overuse injuries when able to maintain current fitness levels, as opposed to, because there's a lot of repetition in sports, regardless of what sport you play, you do the same thing over and over again, but maintaining the ability to keep your strength in the other planes of movement or on the other side, if you're doing a single-sided sport during season, will help to minimize overuse injuries on one side as well.
And I think two important factors that play in, like in season wise, like are you available and are you durable? So if you're available, as in, can you play games because you're not hurt, and are you durable, as in you can withstand more, so by the end of the season, are you still standing? And like strength training is a key element in being available and durable.
And one of those words that we've said the word durable a long time, and our goal in strength is to make sure that you're durable. Can you play in the game longer? And as you said before, can you play the whole season? The season can go anywhere from 6 weeks to up to 20 weeks, depending upon what sport you play. And if you're not durable and available, like she said, well, then your playing time is going to go downhill. Your performance is going to go downhill. I really like those two words.
And you're seeing that in the macro too play out in this day and age as more sports science has come out with your Tom Brady's, your LeBron James. They're playing longer, playing more games, etc.
At a significantly high level, not as they're turning late 30s, early 40s, and still lasting as well as any late 20s or early 30-year-old might last in their sport.
Since you said Tom Brady, I saw something, even though he's not with the New England Patriots anymore, but I saw something in my research that said that the article is 2018, I think, but that the New England Patriots were squatting 80% of their max the week going up to the Super Bowl. So, and they came back from a 25-point deficit in that Super Bowl. So they were squatting 80% of their max 1 week before.
Right.
And again, these are elite athletes, so it's a little bit
there's
different.
Some ranges.
But that was an in-season training, and why could they do the things that they were doing? Guarantee you, because they were still training in their in-season.
Right.
They peaked at the right time.
Yep. And if you notice, there were a lot of changes and shifts from that late 90s to early 2000s in sports, where you started to see more athletes and more club teams and more programs, including in-season training throughout their process. Where there was in the EPL, Liverpool in that early 2000s, they were a powerhouse, and you can see, not that it's the direct change, but you can see a lot of change in the way they started implementing their strength and conditioning and their physio programming during the season. There was a change with golf when we saw Tiger Woods come in and he trains throughout the year as he's playing. There was a change in tennis when we saw Andre Agassi and then the Nadals coming in as they found out how to implement training through their entire competitive process, right? Like, those are the things that you started to see. And now there's also studies that show the reduced, as we said before, the reduced amount of injuries, and then you see that those teams who can successfully implement in-season training at the right level, the right variables, the right frequency, will show success at the end of a long, grueling season.
Right. So we've kind of discussed the benefits of in-season training and how it helps you peak at the right time. What are some differences that you would say between off-season and in-season training specifically?
All right. So we take a look at the sports, and the different sports are going to play a role. What are the demands of the sport? Before we really apply any of these principles, you have to kind of consider what is going on, what movement patterns are normal in their sport, and what movement patterns do we need to make sure are supported by the strength training program. And I'll just take soccer for an instance, because we have two coaches for soccer, and then we have guys really into basketball and some football. So we're going to talk about soccer initially. But soccer is a long sport, period. It's grueling. And it's 90 minutes, and it's played, and at least here in South Carolina, it's played at extreme temperatures. It's going to be hot. It's going to be cold. So you play with 11 players, and they can run anywhere up to 3 to 5 miles, depending upon their position. But there's also a point where you have players that'll play anywhere between 85 to 100% of the game, and then you have players that will play about 20 to 40% of the game, and then you have players who may not play at all in that particular game. So each of those individuals need to be taken care of at a different level. If you play 90 minutes of soccer on Tuesday, you don't need to go into a full-out strength training program on Wednesday. But if you only play 20 minutes worth of the game, well, then the next even 20% to 30% of that game, well, the next day you still have space in to really kind of promote or do a full-out training program. Does that make sense? So if we do that and say, all right, so these guys are going to have a less intense day, and those are going to have a more intense day, we'll have some movements that we're going to go with the squats, the lunges, and we're going to do some anti-rotational work also to help the body to absorb force from opposite sides, especially when you're standing playing on one foot trying to kick a ball, or when you have an athlete or you're fighting for the ball. So some short rep ranges at somewhere between that 75 and 85% range in soccer would be very beneficial. And the reason is, since the sport demands a long period of activity, there's no need to continue and do 8 to 10 reps, because the body's already getting that particular stimulus as you're going through practices. So we want to maintain some form of power and strength throughout the season.
I think that too, with everything you just said, yeah, so that like 3 to 5 rep range is important, but also like exercise-wise, specific exercises, I think you'd need to, for end season, just keep it simple in general, because one, you want to limit soreness, and two, you just kind of, again, want to just not make things too complicated. But if you were adding in all these new exercises, sometimes that makes soreness happen because your body's not used to it.
Yep.
So continuing just general, straightforward exercises that, one, you're still doing movement patterns that are specific to your sport, but it's a more generalized programming. That way your muscles can stay used to what they're doing and don't have to necessarily be so sore.
Right. I think one of the other important aspects too would be, you're not necessarily going to come in and hit a workout that you're going to be sore in every single time. You might come in and have a mobility day one day, and being okay with that.
And then the next question that should come up is, what's the frequency of the actual in-season training? Do we need to work out every day? Absolutely not. The goal is to maintain a level of fitness that you came in with. We're not trying to necessarily exceed it throughout the season. We want to be able to maintain the good hard work that you put into, because what's the worst time to not see the gains is when you're in the thick of season or the end of season, as Ali stated before with Super Bowl, where you had all these gains, but if it's football, you had all the gains, you made the gains in the summer, but the end of the year is played in December and in January, in February in some cases.
And you don't want to, be at the peak of your strength or what performance in the beginning of your season, and then you die out, and then December you got to start all over again. I mean, I can remember even personally as I played D2 soccer, and we didn't have the availability to have, well, we did, but didn't have a strength coach with us all the time. So I even specifically remember I would come into my preseason strongest, fittest that I could be. My technique was on, and then by the end of the season, sometimes I could see that I wasn't as strong. I was fit because I was playing a good bit, but I wasn't as strong as I was coming into it. And then I was getting a lot of technical training in the summer, and then that technical aspect of it died off a little bit, but that's because I wasn't doing it like I was in my off season. So continuing the same thing that you're doing in your off season is super important. Just knowing how to dial it back and or
push it forward when you need to.
Yeah.
Right. The last thing you want is to put in all this work in the off season and then give up on the last 20% of it and not have it there
when
to
it's needed.
fire when it's needed. Yeah.
So it's super important to understand that if you maintain that process through the season, that there will be better results. You should notice, unless you're just kind of oblivious to your own current fitness situation, but for the most part, you'll notice the difference in your season when you when you keep and maintain a continuous process and consistent process of that maintenance work, the mobility work. And as she said before, the simplicity of the program needs to stay there too. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. We're not trying to outdo the next person in this workout. You're just trying to make sure that you have the durability, as you said earlier, to maintain your availability to play the game in the long term.
And if you think about this, like the stronger you are, the more force you can produce. There's the more force you can produce, the higher you can jump, the faster you can run, the harder you can hit. So if you get less and less stronger during the season, you hit less harder. You don't jump as high, you don't run as fast. So those are just a little something to keep in mind with that.
And then with the frequency of your programming, that's going to be dependent on how heavy your actual sport practice is or how intense the games are. You're going to have to manage every week differently. If you have a game or a week where you play one game and it might be the beginning of the week, well, then you can have a little more intensity in your training program later in the week. But if you have a heavy week where you're playing 3 games a week, you may need to dial down the intensity of the workout, and you may only do 1 workout that week. But something needs to occur so that way you can maintain that steady or that strength all the way across the season. So as we come towards the end of this, I think we're each going to put out 1 point that we want you guys to remember or stick with. We'll start with Zach. Give me 1 significant thing that they should hold to.
In-season training is super important to peak at the right time. You're going to dial back your overall volume over the course of the in-season. And it's important to get the in-season training in, not just so that you're maintaining, but also get the right level of it so that you're not overtraining as well.
Mm-hmm.
Be available and durable through the whole season.
Good points. And then make sure, as he said before, the volume of the workout, but just to add on to that, the frequency will change based on the level and the intensity of the actual sport practice itself.
Keep it simple.
And keep it simple. And keep it simple. Cool deal. So again, we thank you guys for watching. We'll be here every Wednesday around lunchtime. You guys have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time.